Hey there, and welcome to episode 6. Do you ever feel like you are one person online and a different person in real life? Are you okay with calling yourself a writer in a Facebook group or on an Instagram post, but it's a whole nother thing to tell your neighbors or your family? I'm guessing I'm not the only one who has answered yes to those questions. Many years ago, I self-published, although I had really no idea what I was doing, a book about the spiritual lessons we learn while homeschooling our kids. I promoted it a bit online and in the homeschooling groups I was involved in, and I sold a few copies. Then one evening, I was at a local homeschool event, and while in the restroom, another woman came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Amy Simon. I've read your book. I really liked it." I was caught totally off guard and felt really awkward. I didn't know what to say. I think I mumbled a thank you, but I don't really remember. It felt like such a strange collision of worlds. Like when you see someone from church at the gym or someone from work at a kid's baseball game. I didn't know how to meld those worlds together. It was so much easier to be bold online than in person. Then there was another instance several years later where I ran into someone I barely knew in the grocery store. She told me she read my blog regularly. I was getting more comfortable with talking to people in person about my writing, and I didn't feel quite as awkward, but it still felt kind of weird. So as I started trying to broaden my reach beyond Facebook and into Instagram, I ran into the issue that many of my neighbors and friends started seeing more of my writing posts. That felt really weird too. And I had to ask why. I think it has to do with how we perceive ourselves and how we think others perceive us. And those two really are linked, especially for those of us who struggle with being concerned about how others see us. Any other Enneagram 3s out there? I believe that others saw me as the frumpy, stay-at-home mom who homeschools her kids, maybe a bit inferior to those who worked outside the home. So for me to proclaim myself as a writer who had something to offer felt kind of presumptuous. Did they really see me that way? And even if they did, would it matter? I suppose that all had more to do with how I perceived myself rather than how others perceive me. Isn't writing interesting how it brings things to the surface in our lives that sometimes have nothing to do with writing itself? So let's go there for a minute. How do you see yourself? How would you describe yourself? Which adjectives would you use if you were being honest? Do you still feel like a kid, even when you're well into the adult category? We need to tread a fine line here and not venture into pride. But I think too often we use what we see as humility as an excuse to not live in who God has created us to be. On one side, we need to realize that all the gifts we have, our abilities, any message that we have to offer someone else is only because of what God has given to us and done in our lives. Without Him, we would have nothing to offer. On the other hand, because we're in Christ, the God of the universe lives within us. He wants to live through us. We have something valuable to offer Him because we have Him. Humility doesn't mean that we wallow in thinking of ourselves as the scum of the earth. Humility means that we acknowledge that anything we have is because of Jesus. But in Jesus, we are sons and daughters of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So how do you see yourself? I would encourage you to spend some time journaling about that. What is your identity based on? Your self-image? How do you think others perceive you? How did people in your past perceive you? If you struggle to claim the title writer to your in-person relationships, does it have to do with a struggle to claim your identity in Christ? One of the other things that I write about is a method of using journaling and spiritual disciplines to uncover lies that we believe about ourselves, God, or others, and replace those lies with truth from the Bible. How we view ourselves ties in to our identity in Christ. If you're interested in what I call the build method, of journaling and spiritual disciplines. I will link to it in the show notes. So back to blending our in-person lives and our online selves. From a practical standpoint, whether we're trying to get our message out there of what we have to offer, it's very helpful to try and reach people both in person and online. Depending on who your reader is, you might find much more success in finding him or her while speaking at a church event, or sharing your story at a support group, or leading a breakout session at a homeschool conference. If we can blend these sides of us and be the same person in real life that we are online, we can be far more effective at reaching our reader with the message that God has given us. I know writers who have found great opportunities in hosting in-person workshops and Bible studies. I've used public speaking opportunities at my church to get to know my readers and serve them. So what can you do this week to blend your online life with your in-person life and be more effective at reaching the people God has given you to serve? Will you tell someone in real life that you're a writer? Maybe research some real life groups that would benefit from what you have to offer. Or maybe spend some time journaling about why you might find it challenging to step into that title of writer. Whatever you decide, I encourage you to be who God has created you to be, both online and off.